All right, we got to begin. Good morning.
Good morning, teacher.
Thank you, Amber. I'll be calling on you a couple times later today, Amber, just to make sure. All right, Chatfields, you have guests with you today.
Yes, I'm honored to introduce 35 years maybe. This is James and Becky and Montel. We've been friends for a long time.
James and Becky, thank you for coming. All right, so we are in week 14.
Victor, are you going to introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, my name's Victor. Thank you, Biz. Yeah, good point. So we are in week 14 of a 15-week course on Reformation and modern church history, so we're almost at the end. Next week will be the last lesson. Yoo-hoo! Woo! Yes. I get May off. So I had a friend who sent me an email, This Day in Church History, and it had a bunch of interesting things, and I looked at it and I thought, the class should know some of these, and so here are some. There are other ones that were a little more obscure, but this is interesting. So all of them, of course, April 13th. Sir Thomas More, Lord Chancellor of England, refuses to take the oath to King Henry VIII's succession to the head of the church. 1 year later, Henry indicted him for treason and had him beheaded. So that's what happens when you don't have religious freedom. Remember, King Henry took over the Roman Catholic Church, became the head of the Church of England, and Thomas More, good Catholic that he was, didn't want anything to do with it and objected and lost his life for it. 1598, Francis Henry IV signs the Edict of Nantes, granting extensive political rights to the Huguenots. And of course, we looked a bit at the Huguenots. The Huguenots retained the right to practice their religion until Louis XIV revoked the edict in 1685. So again, you should know a little bit about that. We touched on the Huguenots. Handel's famous oratorio, Messiah, premieres. All right, there you go, 1742. We didn't really talk about that. Last one, we just mentioned this last week. In 1829, the Emancipation Act, the English Parliament grants freedom of religion to Roman Catholics. Within 3 weeks, the first Catholic was elected to Parliament. It's pretty interesting, and if you look at the first one and the last one, that's almost 300 years from the time that King Henry took over the Catholic Church in England to the time that Catholics were granted religious freedom again in the nation. That is how thorough Anglicanism dealt with Catholicism in the Protestant Reformation. I thought that was very interesting. All right. We are here. We are looking at modernism. So these are the major movements in Western civilization. Before we continue, though, I want you to just have a conversation at your table. Yeah. And thank you, Amber. And I want you to tell me, in your opinion, what makes Western civilization different than, I do have the question up here, than every single civilization before it. Think about how Western civilization differs from all the civilizations that came before it. Go.
What do you mean by Western civilization?
The one we're living in, Western civilization, the one we've been talking about, Western civilization. As in Western civilization. No. Not American. It would be European and then ultimately American civ, right? But don't think American, don't think European, think Western, as opposed to Sunny, who has her hand up, who is not from Western civilization originally, right? She's from China. That would not be considered Western civilization. All right. Maybe you've had some chance to have some ideas here. I've heard a couple of repeated themes. So when you think of great world civilizations, what do you think of? Babylonians, Egyptians, right? The Roman Empire, okay? These kinds of civilizations. And we live in what we call Western civilization. American civilization would be a kind of Western civilization. So would European civilization. African civilization? No, not so much. Okay? Everybody's been infected a little bit by Western civilization, understandably. But let's hear from this table first. What did you say you thought was different about Western civilization from all the other civilizations that went before it?
Human dignity, individualism.
Human dignity, individualism.
One of you guys had something.
I thought Mel's answer.
All right, that's good. That's good. I don't want to steal everybody else's answers, but Mel's answers was really good. Hold that thought, Mel. Table number 1 with the guests. James, I see you looking at your phone. You didn't look it up, did you?
I'm taking notes.
Just kidding.
Mark's got it.
I have a whole bunch. Do you want just one?
Give me 2. Give me 2.
So, I think that one of the unique ones for us, I think, was Ken said shame culture.
Okay.
Was the non-Western, right? And
Honor, shame, more in the East.
Okay, shame culture.
Us, not so much.
Although we've got cancel culture, which is a form of shame culture, isn't it, in essence? But go ahead.
And then James brought up an interesting one that may not be what you're looking for, but it's a very interesting topic. He says that it's more of an American thing, but there's kind of like capitalism or an open market to attract people to your church, as opposed to like, when you're forced to go, when there's freedom of religion, you end up kind of trying to attract. Is that
Yeah, there's less choice. So this is American civilization right there. When they came, because there was not a church, government-led church, they had choice. And so then churches had to adopt to attract parishioners versus more European Western civilization in other countries, because there is government-established church. Choice isn't there. And so-
Sure, in early
and we
American
saw
there
bleed
was...
in culture, we saw bleed in theology because of that.
You might find people that lived in New England and Puritan New England that would have said there's no choice either, at least initially. But good, okay. So you got choice, you got individualism, you've got what? How about you guys back here on the bench warmers back here? Sonny.
So from Chinese civilizations, what I realized, the most difference between Western civilization is the respect of life.
Respect of life. You would say what? We respect it?
Yes, because Western civilizations most grow out of believe God creation, God create life, and God says, I create, I love lives, I respect everybody, every soul is equal in front of me.
Would you say, Sonny, that that's because of a Christian underpinning in the West as opposed to Buddhism in China or something like that, maybe?
Right,
Or?
right.
Okay, all right, very interesting. Respect for life. That wouldn't have necessarily popped up on my radar. That's a real good, that's helpful. You're coming from a different culture, you come to our culture, you look at it, you see things that we don't see. It was the same for me when I was living in Africa. I immediately saw all the errors. No, but seriously, you just see these things that they don't see because they've been living in it. And then I had to start and think, okay, now what's about American culture that I haven't been seeing either? Let's go over here to table number 5. You guys come up with anything, Sarah's table?
We had 2 that were kind of connected, and I'm going to put them in reverse order. The first was there's a basic, it's based collectively on Christian values. They didn't always get there, but that's what they thought they were aiming at.
Okay.
And related to that, they also were able to go places and bring back elements from other cultures and adapt them to their own. I mean, you didn't see China sending people to France to learn about France, but you did see Marco Polo going to China and bringing back what he learned from China.
So you would say Western culture has a way of assimilating other cultures.
Without losing the Christian values on which it's founded.
Kind of like the Borg from Star Trek. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? No? Yes? Yeah. Go around assimilating. Okay, I like it. Good. Mel, let's hear your great answer.
Well, it's just that they have more of an ancestral type of living. They're fatalists. they don't really think that there's any future. They live for the family. You know, I'd watch movies in Vietnam, and it's always the same storyline. You know, some bad guy comes in, kills off the family. The son is saved, and he grows up. He goes to some secret training with some ninjas, and comes back and avenges the whole family, wipes them all out.
Sounds like a good Western. Outlaw Josie Wales. Anybody know Outlaw Josie Wales? That's my favorite Western. Anyway. Oh, you got to see Outlaw Josie Wales.
Their culture is all ancestral, I guess. They don't really they don't look forward to the next day. You know, they're just getting along every day, it seems like. And
Okay.
whatever happens, that's the way it should be. They're just fatalists.
Fatalist. Yes, Biz.
I feel like I see the opposite side of that in the Disney culture of like everyone is special and everyone has a great thing that they can go do and they have to leave behind the past. I
Okay.
feel like Western civilization, or at least American, because that's what I know, newer is always better. and
Newer
change
is always
good.
better. Okay. And what? Say
And
last.
change is good.
Change is good, huh?
As opposed to what I've heard from Eastern civilizations in which you're honoring your family and you're sacrificing for a greater good, perhaps. You're not going to be a Disney princess. Like,
Oh.
that's not at all what their heroes look like.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, African, you honor the ancestors, you do what the generation before you did. There is a lack of an entrepreneurial spirit because if you go out and try something differently, you get the ancestral spirits angry at you, and then they hit you with, crop destruction or whatever. So the one thing that I heard mentioned numerous times while you were discussing, and now nobody said it really now, was the freedom of religion idea and religion in general. This is the first thing that pops into my mind. We are a secular civilization, whether you know it or not, and every other civilization before us was religious. It integrated the religion into everyday life seamlessly. Whereas we are secular, and that's what we're going to talk about today. When we say liberal, we mean secular, okay? As opposed to conservative, which is we conserve, we maintain what has already gone before us. We don't change it. You right now have a Supreme Court that is somewhat divided between your conservatives, which are 5 or 6 of them, and your liberals, which are 3 and maybe a 4th sometimes, depending on the issue. But your conservatives say, we want to interpret the Constitution the way the Founding Fathers meant it 250 years ago. That's what we want. That's why we call them conservatives. And the liberals say, we need to adapt it to the changing times and changing circumstances. And if that means throwing out a lot of long-held understandings and beliefs, we're going to do it. The Supreme Court voted liberal on gay marriage 10 years ago, 5-4. And there was one guy there who was known as a conservative that voted with the liberals. Pretty amazing. All of that is to say that when we're looking at Western civilization, I want you to think in terms of a civilization that does not have religion fully integrated into it. This is going to take time. It didn't pop up overnight. You're going to say, wait a minute, but America was founded by people who wanted religious freedom. Yeah, fine, but that's not what the founding documents say. We have a separation of church and state, so we keep hearing over and over and over again. And where did you ever have that before? This is the first experiment. But Western civilization started that ball rolling in Europe long before the Americans come around on the scene and perfect it.
So you mean modern Western civilization?
As opposed to what?
Western civilization from the time of Constantine? I mean, I don't know. That's why I was asking for your clarifying question at the beginning, because I kind of agreed with Sarah. It's like, because yeah, if we go back to Luther's time, there wasn't religious freedom. There was one church. There were So I guess as I heard you talk, I was like, oh, the question's about modern Western civilization, because if we're talking Western civilization from the time of Western civilization, like Constantine, well, that's a very different sort of a question. That's all.
That's good. No, that's fine. So we are talking about modernism, right? That's where we are here.
That's what I just, yeah. So what did you mean?
Yeah. No, that's good. So let's look at what happened in our Western ideals, and when I'm saying that now, we're talking about European ideals that are going to rethink our approach to the supernatural. So think about the scientific method that is going to develop. We've already seen the scientific method and how monumentally important that is in European society. It's the Europeans who come up with the scientific method, not the Africans, not the Chinese. Sure, they had science, but not the scientific method. And so what is that method? Observation, experimentation, repeatability, the expectation of the uniformity of all events. Anybody see Project Hail Mary? Have you gone out and seen the movie? Fun movie. The question in there is why the lead guy, Grace, basically asks the question, why do I expect that all the rules of physics here on planet Earth apply everywhere else in the universe? Okay? And they don't when he goes out there. It was one of the most frustrating parts of the movie for me, quite honestly, because I wanted to know which set of physics rules were applying when he was out there with the alien at the spaceship, because it seemed like all the rules of physics, except for one, when the, one, I'm going on a tangent here. Doesn't matter. Let's stop. I'm going to shut up. Okay, forget it. It's a great... read the book? No way. I've seen the movie already. The book would ruin it for me. We expect a uniformity of events. That's the scientific method. That's why they're looking for water everywhere, because we know that you have to have water to have life. So they're always looking for signs of water everywhere else in the universe. That's the scientific method. It's the assumption there. And then we're going to say, a man comes back from the dead? Well, that's ridiculous. We don't see that today. It doesn't happen regularly. You can't repeat it. Therefore, it must not be true. If it's not true, what is it? Well, then it's myth, it's legend, it's primitive stories by primitive people. And this is what begins to happen. I want you to understand, the scientific method is an incredible, wonderful gift from God. And when the Europeans saw what it opened up to the possibilities of truth and discovery and invention and everything else, they said, hey, let's use this one knife and try to use it on religion too. And there's where it fails. Because God is not subject to the scientific method. Okay? So that's what's happening here. So I want you to think about this. I want you to think about being a Christian in the age of modernity, the rising decades of science and scientific method, and trying to make Christianity reasonable to people who no longer embrace the supernatural. So let's just think of some biblical things. You're a Christian, and you're not trying to destroy Christianity. Let's just keep that in mind. You're not an atheist who hates Christians or Christianity. The virgin birth of Jesus, that seems to be what the Bible teaches pretty clearly. Yes? Yes. Okay. Thank you. My pastor laughing at me. I must be in trouble. No, okay. It's all right. Well, I said it seems to be. Yes. Okay. You are a good Christian in the 18th century, 19th century, in Western parts of the world. And you understand that supernatural mumbo-jumbo just doesn't cut the mustard anymore. You've got to figure it out. So how are you going to explain the virgin birth? You're not going to get rid of the virgin birth. The virgin birth's in the Bible. You got to reimagine it. Yes, Sarah.
Well, I think that she probably was raped by some soldier named Pantherus, and so because they didn't want to lose face, they just said it came about. And I say that because apparently there's something to that. There was a legend about that at some time.
Okay, all right. Wow, rape. You went right to that one. Okay.
I think like an old lady.
Oh, gosh, Sarah. No, that's good. All right. So maybe not, but I mean, there are some kooky stories out there, yeah, to try to, suggest she did get pregnant by a guy. They made this up. But that's much more of a negative view of it. I want you to think of it in terms positively. Maybe this is a difficult one to start with.
Can it just be miracle?
No, because this is the problem. So miracles don't exist, Amber. Your scientific method proves that miracles cannot exist. Right? By definition, a miracle is unrepeatable. You can't experiment and do it again. So it doesn't exist.
Can it be, sorry, graphic, can it be that God donated a sperm?
Huh.
So where'd that, that's supernatural. Where's that come from?
It's still supernatural. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Very good point.
I
Kristen.
know. They found a baby in a manger that was left there by his mother, who was afraid it was going to get killed by Herod. And so they adopted it, and they named it Moses, Jesus. And
I like it. Now you're thinking like a Christian liberal. Good job, Sarah.
thank you.
Kristen.
Is the Immaculate Conception of Mary still fall under supernatural or
Yes. So we just dealt with that last week, actually. So God miraculously protects her from sin in her conception. Right. You guys it's probably good. You're not thinking as good liberals, Bill, and then I'll come to you.
You can look at Isaiah 9 and interpret the word virgin there as young woman, and so maybe it's just like a misunderstanding, and so perhaps it wasn't actually a virgin birth, but just a young woman gave birth.
Yeah, and now we're getting to it a little more closely. I just had this conversation with a guy this week at Samaritan's Purse. He was asking me exactly about this translation issue and Isaiah and all of that. Interestingly, the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament 200 years before Jesus, picked the word virgin and didn't have any reason to. You know what I mean? It wasn't a guy coming after Jesus and saying, hey, we better make it virgin because that's what it teaches about Jesus. It was 200 years before Jesus, and those guys picked the word virgin to represent that Hebrew word. That's a really good argument for us, but regardless. Listen, the virgin birth is a symbolic teaching. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Carr.
Aren't there creatures or parasites that reproduce themselves?
There are, but this doesn't apply here. But thank you. It's okay. No, it's all right. It's all right.
I tried.
They're asexual, right? They're asexual, organisms that. Well, no, that's what they are. Anyway.
There's parts in
Hey,
Genesis
here we go.
where you can have a female snake that lays eggs, but then they can only make more females. So the fact that Jesus was male means that it can't be any of those. Yeah, there's a couple different reptile species that can do it, but females can only make more females because you only have X chromosomes. The fact that there is a Y chromosome means that it couldn't be that.
Okay. Sounds like Jurassic Park now. All my movie things are coming out here. Life will find a way. Okay, anyway. Virgin birth is just a story that is meant to symbolize Jesus' unique spiritual importance. It is a subjective answer. You guys are coming up with some really great mechanical answers to how maybe this worked. And I'm not saying that those aren't possible, answers. But here we're just going to spiritualize it. Let me give you this one. Jesus walked on water. Now your mechanical one might be a little better. There's the miracle. Jesus walks on water in the Gospels. How do you explain it as a good scientific person?
It was really shallow.
It was really shallow.
There was like a stone or something.
A stone or a sandbar. And what do you have to have? You have to have the disciples with a certain perspective, right? A distance where it appears that he's walking on the water, but he's really just on a sandbar or something like that. Very good. Okay, that one's really easy. Mark.
Or more
A mirage, okay. Or ice. In Sea of Galilee, Middle East, maybe not. But I like it. It's fine. It's fine. We're just spitballing here, right? Don't worry about it.
Standing on the whale.
Standing on the whale. All right. Amber, welcome back to class. Feeding of the 5,000. How about this one?
People just share their.
There, that's all it is. Boy, you went right to it. So the disciples only have a little bit of food. In fact, it's a boy in the one account, right, that has the food, and he shares. And this isn't a miraculous multiplication of fish and bread. That would be silly. That's ridiculous. How can you take a piece of bread and just multiply it? It doesn't work that way scientifically. But what it was an outpouring of generosity. Everybody else who brought a little bit of food also saw the generosity of the disciples, and they all started to share with each other. It's pretty silly because they'd all have to have enough food to feed everybody. So,
12 more baskets,
yeah,
right?
well, and there's extra left over and such. Ken?
I think Al and Nancy have told me the story at their previous church of the story of the feeding of the 5,000 was the miracle of the little boy who shared his lunch.
Oh, there you go. Okay, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
And it produced that, and the other people were touched by that, and they began sharing.
It's a very subjective sort of answer to it. Clem?
Isn't a lot of this just kind of like ageism, where everybody before us was stupid,
Yes.
and we're the only ones who are smart?
Yeah, primitive civilization, they were idiots. Yeah, that's, they built the pyramids. Well, they didn't. Aliens did. But, Jesus' miraculous healings, a lot of them here. What might you think would be an explanation?
Placebo effect.
Explain it, Bill. Placebo effect.
Someone tells you you're healed, the power of positive thinking actually helps you get better.
Power of positive thinking helps you get better. I've got written down here, Jesus' profound spiritual and even psychological effect on people, that they had some psychosomatic, healing experience, because he's just such a powerful, powerful personality and individual. But of course, you don't have a blind man actually being healed by mud put on his eyes, miraculously in that sense. It could be metaphorical about our need to care for the marginalized, which Jesus consistently reached out to. Again, these are kind of subjective sorts of answers. The empty tomb, you might know, well, they got the wrong tomb, or things of that nature. Your Christian liberal scholars, remember, these are Christian liberal scholars. They're not trying to destroy Christianity. They're trying to make it understandable and palatable to modern man, to modern scientific man. So the empty tomb, they just got the wrong tomb or something like that. And then the resurrection of Jesus is nothing more than, this is how he made me feel. We came to Jesus, we heard his teaching, we met him, saw his character, and we were born again. He has brought life to me. I didn't have purpose and meaning, and now I do.
Do they think that Jesus is not alive?
Yes, Jesus is just a teacher. He's not God. That's ridiculous. That God would become a human being.
And
That
that's
would.
a Christian. You're saying this is a liberal Christian?
Yes, definitely. That's what a liberal now. That's okay. See, even the word liberal today, right? So let's just go back a couple centuries first,
Keep going after the word Christian.
because the word liberal today might just mean a Christian who says gay marriage is okay. Do you know what I mean? They might still believe Jesus is God and stuff like that too. But these guys back here, what do I have here? Reimagining the supernatural. Get rid of everything supernatural. Everything that you think of that's supernatural in our faith, get rid of it completely.
Well, then-
That's liberalism.
So he died, but then he didn't rise again.
And he's not God.
Yeah, of course he's not God.
So then how?
That's not Christian.
Okay, guys. Of course, you're obviously right if you don't believe in the resurrection. But I'm telling you, these are self-proclaimed Christians who like Jesus and don't believe in the supernatural. Okay?
Yeah, 'cause
That you're saying that, well, then they can't be saved is a moot point. It doesn't matter. You're right, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, go ahead.
Just because it becomes an issue of interpretation. If you're taking too strict of an interpretation, you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's symbolic. You shouldn't be doing that.
Well, it's what they think. So
Yeah,
they
yeah,
think
yeah,
they're-
right.
They're Christians.
Weren't the Sadducees religious, but they tended not to believe in the supernatural?
Well, they didn't believe in a resurrection, right?
Yeah, and I think some other things that were supernatural based as well.
Again, backtrack a second here. Western civilization discovers the scientific method, you understand, develops the scientific method. Christianity has all of these miraculous stories in it that we know now cannot be scientifically, rationally true. And so we have to reimagine all of these things in Scripture to supposedly make them palatable to a modern mindset that no longer adopts these primitive, backward, legendary, mythical stories. That's what's happening here. And so you have all of your best scholars doing this in Christianity. And when I say all, that's maybe an exaggeration, but it is incredible how many there are. So I'm going to move a little more quickly here. Jesus becomes, Amber, just to answer the question in full, the most godly man, the most insightful teacher, the one who understood and acknowledged more than anybody else his dependence on God. But heaven forbid that he was the incarnation of God himself into a human being. That's ridiculous. That's miraculous. You see what I mean? That's supernatural.
So would most of these liberal scholars also be kind of more deists then too?
Sure, and that's going to be the movement, right?
Obviously, if you believe in a God and he interacts with the world, God can do whatever he wants to do. But if you're saying, no, he just stays up there and...
That's the first move, right? We go from theism to deism, where God is disinterested and distant, and we're going to move ultimately to atheism. And, you know, it's some of these guys who call themselves Christians. I wonder, how do they even believe in God? I took a course in my master's degree at Wheaton College. It was an elective. It was an advanced systematic theology course, and there were only 2 of us in the class. Mike Pippin was the other one. You guys know Mike. And so that was it. So we met in the professor's home. And he gave us 2 things to read. He said, here's Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Faith, and here's Schleiermacher's Systematic Theology. And it was a book about that thick, Schleiermacher. We're going to see his name here just now. And when I read the whole thing, from beginning to end, I still wasn't sure if he believed in God. That's how confusing it was. That's how convoluted it was. It was a book this thick. And I honestly wasn't sure at the end, does this guy believe in God? Because he said God was the feeling of absolute dependence. He is the father of subjective liberal theology. Truth is what's true to me. It's what changes me. It's what's subjectively true to me. And just as Jesus emulates what it means to be truly dependent upon God, that's God, in essence, this feeling of absolute dependence. And I said that to my professor. By the way, I got an A in the class, and Pippin got a B, just to let you know. It's on tape now, too. Okay, anyway. But seriously, I said to him, I still don't even know if he really believes in God or not. And he said, neither do I. It's that confusing. So don't look here. For all the rationality that these guys here, don't look for something that's entirely rational to us, in essence. What you're going to have out of this is going to be 2 things. Pluralism. You, in essence, are going to boil down all religions to moral truths. Who Jesus is not so important as what he teaches about how to live a moral life. And when you just boil Christianity down to that, you get rid of all the miraculous. Get rid of it, all of it, gone. What do you have left? You have morality of Jesus. Love your neighbor. Don't kick the dog. You know, these sorts of things. And whoa, when I go and I look at Islam, or I go and look at Buddhism or Hinduism, lo and behold, I find similar morality in general terms. And so that's all religion. They're all basically the same. So now we get to pluralism. What is pluralism? All religions are basically equal. They all lead to the same place. And then with this comes relativism. And that is, as you know, truth is what I define it to be. So this is the movements in Western civilization that are going to they're going to be kick-started by the scientific method of all things, where we're going to use this wonderful scientific tool and we're going to use it on religious belief. All right. Key Protestant liberal scholars. I'm going to run through these names. There's Schleiermacher. What a great name. I just always love saying it, Schleiermacher. Okay, but he's the father of liberal theology. Just look at his years. Here's another guy, F.C. Bauer, another guy, Albert Rischel, another guy, Adolf von Harnack, another guy, Ernst Troeltsch, another guy, Albert Schweitzer. Anything in common? They're all French guys, right? Right? Oui, oui. They're all German. That is not by accident, because Germany is going to be the hotbed of Protestant liberalism 200 years after Martin Luther. That's it. 200 years. It didn't even take really 200, okay? But that's pretty amazing. Well, yeah, 200 to 300. All right. Albert Schweitzer is going to become famous in 1910 for his quest for the historical Jesus. And this is going to dominate Christian scholarship for 100 years. That is, the Jesus that we see in the Gospels cannot be the real Jesus. How did you get to this supernatural, miracle, wonder-working Jesus from just a Middle Eastern first century Jew who was a rabbi, a teacher? How are you going to do that? You're going to need a lot of time, a lot of embellishment, a lot of creativity. And so what Schweitzer, who was a famous missionary to Africa, is going to do is he's going to try to look for, in the Gospels, what's the kernel of truth about Jesus that is shrouded with all of this supernatural mumbo-jumbo that's around him. And this is what scholarship is going to be like. F.C. Bauer is going to be the father of the historical critical method. I have to tell you, when I started that master's degree so many years ago at Wheaton College, my first course that I took was New Testament theology. That's what it was called, New Testament theology. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And all it did was go through all of these liberal scholars. And I was so disappointed, so irritated. If it weren't for the fact that I don't like not finishing something that I started, I probably would have quit right there in the first course, because I thought we were going to study the New Testament and actually what the New Testament teaches, not what all these liberal scholars in scholarship have been teaching about the New Testament. But that's what the course was. Now, in retrospect, it was very helpful to me, but only after, you go through the whole thing. Anyway, all right, all of this is to say that, and this last thing. So we begin to question every conservative ideal about the Bible. When it was written, by whom it was written, this becomes a famous one, a documentary hypothesis. If I were to ask you who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, you would say Moses, because that's what the Jews believed, that's what Christians believed, all the way down the line until here. When now they begin to study the Bible and look at it just like any other piece of literature. There's nothing supernatural about the Bible. There's no divine inspiration. These are just men who are coming up with their ideas, and sometimes just their best ideas that they can come up with for their subjective explanation for their experience of God in their life. That's the liberal approach to the Bible. So we're going to question everything. So let me see how sharp you are. I have Isaiah prophesying about a king who is going to come and conquer the Babylonians, and he even names him Cyrus. And Isaiah is about 150 to 200 years before The Medo-Persians conquer the Babylonians. You and I would say, hey, that's prophecy fulfilled. What would a liberal Christian scholar say?
There are 3 authors to Isaiah.
Say?
There are 3 authors to Isaiah.
Okay, that's fine. There are different authors to Isaiah, and they're put together, but we still have this one problem. So what else?
Written over different time periods.
Written afterwards. That's all it is, okay? So you change the date. I mean, you can change the author too, but the date in this case is going to be the key one, right? So instead of Isaiah writing 150 years to 200 years before Cyrus, you just say Isaiah writes after the fact. No more miracle. No more prophecy and fulfilled prophecy. You've gotten rid of it by simply changing the date of authorship. Now, with the gospel writers, the same thing. These guys didn't see Jesus, because if they really did see Jesus, none of them would have told you that he walked on water. Well, maybe not that, but that he was a miracle worker. So you have to have a lot of time. After the Jesus event, most of the liberal scholars are going to say the New Testament books, like the Gospels, are written even into the 2nd century, and some of them very late into the 2nd century, to give you enough time for the myth to develop. This is what these guys are going to do. I've got a lot of notes here. 3 critical tools. We're not even going to worry about this. Okay, well, there are the tools. Rudolf Bultmann. Bultmann has this quote. It's a very famous one. It is impossible to use electric light and the wireless and to avail ourselves of modern medical and surgical discoveries and at the same time believe in the New Testament world of spirits and miracles. Okay, boil it down. You can't live in the age of electric lights and still believe there are angels and demons. That's just mumbo-jumbo nonsense. Okay? And he's going to be one who is going to say, we need to demythologize the Bible. We need to get rid of all of the supernatural stuff and try to find the kernel or essence of the gospel. And these underlying assumptions are the Bible is inspired. These men attempted to describe their personal experience of God, and then they certainly recorded errors of fact and history. Now, all of this is still within our secular, modern, what I would say, Western society. We have a Christian underpinning, of course we do. The founding fathers in America were at least deists, if not outright Christians, but they weren't atheists, and they certainly weren't Muslims. Okay? So we have a Judeo-Christian underpinning to our documents, our founding documents, right? This life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is endowed by God, by the Creator, okay? Not by government, by the way. Government's not the one who gives you your rights. You already have your rights because God gives them to you. That's the American ideal. We're kind of losing that a bit. All right, 19th century. These 4 liberals are going to come through. Hegel, a German philosopher. Marx, a German political theorist. Some more Germans here. Thank goodness we have a Brit thrown in here for good measure. But let me hold off here. Hegel is a philosopher who's going to say that all truth basically is developed by a historical process. He called it the dialectic method. There's no transcendent supernatural truths out there from God. Truth is defined by history. And as history moves from thesis to antithesis, it ultimately gets the two and synthesizes them. And this is truth. Marx comes along with that. Of course, we all know Marx. Marx comes along and says all truth comes through social and political means. In fact, religion is evil. It's the opiate of the people. Religion is used by people in power to control the weak. That's why every time Marxism is rooted firmly in a society, Christianity is the first thing to get attacked. Do you not see it today in America? Of course we see it today in America. It's happening consistently. Marxist tactics of class warfare, of ethnic strife and confrontation, all of these things constantly fomented are just Marxist tactics to get us to separate, to destroy the fabric of our society so that it can be reinvigorated with Marxist ideals. This is where truth comes from, so said Marx. Darwin, of course, we all know Darwin. He's going to be the father of evolutionary theory. Are humans made uniquely in the image and likeness of God? No, we're just advanced ape-like creatures through an evolutionary, random biological process. And then the fourth one, Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychiatry. What is religion? Religion is just modern wish fulfillment. You recognize that you live in a brutal, cold, hostile universe that you have no control over. So what do? You create some omnipotent, omniscient God who is always going to watch over you, who is always going to take care of you. And when you're done with this cold, cruel life, he's going to take you to heaven for eternal bliss. That's just a psychological wish fulfillment because we know there's no God. And your kids understand that yeah. Okay. So, all right. You get all of that, okay? So these guys all come along and they basically are bringing from different points of view, from science, from psychology, from socio-political, all of this, things that are undermining the Christian fabric, if you would, of our Western civilization. They're monumentally important men. Out of this is going to come something also called liberation theology. The gospel is expressed in socio-political terms as liberation. The greatest sin is not the violation of God's standards, but social injustice. That's going to be the worst thing you can have. So you have black theology, liberation theology. That is, we need to free ourselves from the oppression of white people. You have feminist liberation theology. We need to separate or free ourselves, liberate ourselves from domineering, patriarchal, misogynistic men, who usually typically are just white, but you get it. All right. You have homosexual liberation theology. We need to free ourselves from the confines of heterosexism and cisgenderism and all of these sorts of things. All of this is the fruit of this tree. It's all coming from the same place. So it really is fundamentally important to us. I just want you to see here that the devil's work is not so much in coming and saying, hey, we need new objective truths to compete with the objective truths of Scripture. But rather, the devil's work is to say there are no objective truths. And once you have the mental anarchy that you can believe whatever you want to believe, and it's perfectly fine and it's perfectly valid, you end up with political and physical anarchy. Nobody's going to respect authority. I get to do whatever I want to do. So we can all get together and we can riot down in the streets of Chicago and destroy property, and they're just doing it again now, these young teen mobs, and nobody does anything about it. And the mayor of Chicago actually excuses them. Well, they come from a disadvantaged background and all of that sort of stuff, he says. Really? So that gives them the right to just walk the magnificent mile and break windows and destroy cars and property and hurt people that are innocent bystanders and whatever else is happening? That's the anarchy that comes from a relativistic viewpoint that says, I can believe what I want to believe. Nobody can tell me how I should behave. And it's the fruit. Now, you could say Martin Luther started all this. You could. You could go 500 years ago and say Luther is actually the one that said, I'm standing up against the man. And in that case, the man was the Pope, right? Okay? And that's not true. Well, yeah, in some sense, that's the individualism that you guys mentioned in Western society. That's what it's inculcated in us as Americans. We are individuals. I had people over in South Africa that would say to me, you Americans are always so confident. And I would say there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And there is, okay? But we're raised to think this way, to be individualistic, to strike out on our own. a lot of cultures don't think that way. My dad has the farm. It's my responsibility as his firstborn to take care of the farm. And it'll be the responsibility of my firstborn to take care of the farm. I'm not going to move to the city. That is really rather uniquely Western, this individualism. So all of this is coming about here. I'm moving quickly. We're going to get to the denominational problem now. So this is affecting culture in general. How is it affecting churches now and denominations? And this is the 20th century, so we're already up to the early 1900s. Modernism versus fundamentalism. So here, modernism rejected the supernatural in Scripture and its origin, embraced evolutionary theory, and through the social gospel blurred the line between the church and the world. Okay? All of this has been laid down for a couple of centuries. And now we're coming into the 1900s. This is just a little over 100 years ago. And how is this going to be affected? Well, conservatives begin to separate themselves. They say, you know what? Everything around us and all the institutions are starting to become rather liberal-minded. And so the best thing for us to do is to separate from them. We're going to take our kids out of the public schools and send them to Christian schools. We're no longer going to go to the Harvards and Princetons and Yales of the world. We're going to create our own universities. We're going to get out of those churches that are starting to imbibe on some of this and start our own. But there's going to be a struggle first. There's going to be a fight in every single mainline denomination in America except the Southern Baptists. They're the only ones who are not going to split over this. Every other one is going to have a fight at their general assemblies, at their caucuses, at their synods, whatever. And they're going to fight about, are we going to be conservative or are we going to start to adopt liberal ideas about Christianity and the Bible and faith? And every one of them, the conservatives are going to lose. Every single one of them. The conservatives lose. Just keep that in mind. Now, when I say lose, what do I mean? They get kicked out, they separate, they go start their own churches, they go start their own schools. Princeton was the quintessential Presbyterian seminary of America. It went liberal. So Gretchen Mason and others separated and started Westminster. Perhaps you've heard of Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia, now in California, and started that seminary. They separated from the Presbyterian Church and began the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, the OPC. These are the things that are happening in American churches. The Nazarenes are going to separate from the United Methodists because the Methodists are becoming too liberal for their liking and start the Nazarene Church. And it happens everywhere. The only denomination, the biggest one, but the only one not to have this problem, is the Southern Baptists. Between 1910 and 1915, 12 pamphlets, they're going to be called the Fundamentals, were published that included 90 articles by 64 authors. They're going to sell 3 million copies in the United States. That's pretty good back in 1910. And this is where we're going to get the term fundamentalism. Now, today, the term fundamentalism is rather a pejorative term. You think of a Muslim strapping on a suicide vest and walking into a mall. He's a fundamentalist, okay? Or something of that nature. But it's going to get boiled down to 5 fundamentals of the Christian faith. Now, I want to see what 5 you would choose. So let's hear it. You only have 5 truths. Elizabeth. Stop. Good. Virgin birth is number 1. I'm not going to let you name all 5, Elizabeth. I'll give you a second one. Go ahead. What's the second one?
Jesus is God?
No. Surprisingly not. It had been the first one I would have had on the 5. It's in the articles, the 90 articles, but not when they boiled it down to 5. It's shocking, but that's a very good guess. I'd be right there with you. Anybody else? We got virgin birth. Resurrection. Good. The scriptures are what? Inspired and inerrant. Very good. I had a South African principal at our Bible college said, the American gift to the church universal was the inerrancy of Scripture. Now, it was believed already before U.S. conservatives put it as one of its fundamentals, but the fact is the United States evangelicals and the United States Christians put it really on the map in a big way, that Scripture is without error. Virgin birth, Jesus' miracle, substitutionary atonement of Jesus. Elizabeth, again, I'm with you. My number one would probably be Jesus is God. But anyway, so as these things happen, they come out with these articles, it gets boiled down to these 5, and churches basically begin to fight over these. And your conservatives are going to get kicked out of every one of them, ultimately. Questions about that? We got 10 minutes left. I'm almost done. Boy, I did well.
So in this early 1900s, there wasn't the debate we see now about the Big Bang versus creation versus who was always there.
Scopes monkey trial comes in 1925. Okay, so we're right around here where society now is going to start to move away from Christian ideals in the schoolroom. It takes a long time. It doesn't happen overnight.
Because at this time, the dominating scientific viewpoint was it's always been here and it always will be.
That's correct, until the Big Bang comes in the 1960s, 1950s. Yeah, so you're right. The universe has always been here. But in terms of like evolutionary theory, it's going to be the Scopes trial. Gotcha. Yeah. The great reversal is what's going to happen here. I want you to think back to a couple lessons ago where we talked about great reform movements from evangelicals like John Wesley, the guy who created Sunday school, the guy who founded the Salvation Army, Booth, right? And others, okay? Were all done by people who believed all of these things. Now conservatives start to separate themselves from society, and they call it the Great Reversal for this reason. It used to be conservatives that cared about society and reforming these ills. I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I mused, where is a church that is coming up with the solution to the homelessness problem in America? That would have happened in the 1700s. Christians would have figured that out. They wouldn't have left it to the government to figure it out. They wouldn't have left it to Gavin Newsom to figure out. And then throw billions and billions and billions of dollars at it for nothing. Maybe I should do it, but I don't have any great ideas. Anyway, but you see what I mean? That's what conservative Christians did in society. The Great Reversal, we left society. Now, underpinning that was a premillennialism, an eschatological view that was coming on the ascendancy. And that is to say, the world's only going to get worse. We're going to hell in a handbasket, as the saying goes. It's downhill from here. So, what's the most important thing? Talk about salvation and heaven and the afterlife. That's the most important thing. Now, there's something to be said with that being true at a certain level, but not at the exclusion of caring for people now, too. You want both, but the pendulum swings. So you got all the liberals over here that are caring about society. They're selling a social gospel. We saw it on the last slide. And basically, they're making it very fuzzy. They're not really talking about supernatural stuff. They're talking about liberating people here and now. Oh, you're a black man. Let me bring you the gospel. The gospel is you need to be freed from white people. That's your main problem today, is the white man. That's your problem in your society. Really? Yeah, okay. I want to say something, but we'll continue on. The Great Reversal is that all the conservatives leave it all to them, and now all we talk about is heaven. And you've heard that saying, he's so heavenly minded that he's of no earthly good. Okay? You need both. That's the Great Reversal. So what is going to happen? Within fundamentalist circles, by the middle of the 20th century, you're going to have moderates that are going to rise up within fundamentalism and say, we can't do this. We can't separate ourselves from the world. Enter The evangelicals. Okay? Moderate voices among the fundamentalists rose. How can the world be positively influenced if those people who preach the pure gospel withdraw from society? And then the second question, when conservatives consistently remove themselves from critical learning, how can they attain intellectual respectability in society? Who's going to be the quintessential evangelical of the 20th century? Billy Graham, okay? He's not just an evangelist. He's going to start Christianity Today. He's going to be involved with, but not begin, the National Association of Evangelicals in 1942, and soon they had 10 million members in it. When you have some religious issue today, and the newspaper, the media, the television, whatever, goes to talk to a scholar, a Christian scholar, do they pick evangelical scholars? No, they don't. They go to a guy like Bart Ehrman or somebody like that. He's a liberal guy. He doesn't believe any of the supernatural mumbo-jumbo. That's what they do because we've lost our voice in society. Nobody thinks of us as intellectually rigorous now. We're just a bunch of stupid people talking about spiritual heavenly things. All right, that's the great reversal. I've got Billy Graham here. He lived to be 100. Christianity Today began in 1956. Over the last 2 decades, though, evangelicalism has started to soften. All right, let me ask you this question. In what ways do we see liberal or secular tendencies creeping into the church today? I hinted at this in the weekly email. This is the last slide. We've got 5 minutes. Okay, transgender ministers, and I mentioned it in the email, the sexual morality of liberalism creeping into the church, no doubt. All right, I mean, the Methodists just split recently over the issue of gay marriage, gay clergy, and that sort of thing. But what other ways? That one's an easy one. That's a good softball one, right? That one we can see easily. There's other ones that I think are a little more subtle, are subtler. Yes, Nate?
A couple years ago during Sunday school, you had us define what salvation was.
Okay.
When we all got done, you're like, you never mentioned sin.
Oh, okay.
I think we don't talk about sin as much or deal with it as much.
Okay, so maybe avoiding, I'm not saying at Living Hope, we are doing, we're preaching the gospel here, but a lot of churches are avoiding the tough topics like sin, like judgment, hell, eternal damnation, these things.
Jesus saved you, but from what?
Yeah, that's it. What are you saved from? God's wrath? A holy God? These sorts of things. What else? That's very good. All religions are good. You're getting more Christians like that. I actually did devotions just on Friday. We have devotions every morning, but on Friday we have them here. Anyway, Samaritan's Purse, and I asked them at devotions, they don't usually get questions, but I asked them, in what ways do we make Jesus conform to our image? These false images of Jesus. And one person said exactly that. They were at school or something like that, and she was inviting somebody to a church thing, and the lady said, well, my Jesus is not your Jesus. And she said, what do you mean? She said, my Jesus welcomes everybody and all religions, was the lady's answer, Well, my Jesus is, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. You're not going to get to the Father except through me. That's the biblical Jesus. Yeah, it is pretty exclusive, and it's pretty darn intolerant. Right? We want the just as, I said this Friday, we want the just as I am Jesus, where just as I am means I never have to change. That's what we want. Not the Jesus picks me because I'm a stinking, rotten sinner, and he determines that he's going to change me. He's going to transform me. The biblical word is metamorphosis. That's what I need. The fact of the matter is, I need to die first to be born again. That tells you a lot about how valuable I am apart from Christ, if I have to die first. That means I bring nothing to the table, absolutely nothing. That's the gospel. But a lot of churches are shying away from that. Pastor
with,
Ken.
With marriage.
Marriage.
Roles within marriage, headship of men, servant leaders, kind of thing. But kind of an egalitarian. No, we're both, equal in this way. There's no leader, kind of a thing, rather than a complementarian viewpoint on marriage.
Good. So complementarian viewpoint and as opposed to an egalitarian. Both are equal. I'm repeating it for the video. Sorry. And then I would say divorce, right? I mean, you keep in mind, Jesus, he's got some harsh things to say about divorce. In fact, he says if you divorce improperly, you commit adultery. And adulterers were stoned to death in the Old Testament. That's pretty harsh. But we've kind of viewed divorce as, pretty acceptable. And I don't know if it's still true, but 10 years ago, the divorce rate among atheists in America was 33%. Among evangelicals, 34%. No difference. That's pretty shocking. Anything else? We're done. Okay.
20
Jeff.
years now, but there was a popular book, All the Rage, talking about the theological beliefs of young people, and it was summarized as moralistic therapeutic deism. This person did a big sociological study, and even those self-professed Christians, that's kind of what the young people, it was moralistic. God just wants us to obey and follow the commandments.
Do good things.
Therapeutic, it was very self-help and about what it is for me, and then it was leaning toward deistic, not a supernatural there. So yeah.
Wow, moralistic therapeutic deism.
It was all the rage.
Wow.
We were still in Africa when everybody was talking about it, but it was all the rage. And still, and he wrote a second book about it. Anyway, there you go. That's kind of what this person says. Yeah, that's in the church. It's rampant. This kind of, which is would be very liberal kind of sounding.
That's it. So I just want you, when you go away here today, to think about how long ago the seeds were planted for this. We say it happened in the 1960s, right? A lot of seeds in America were planted in the 60s there, and in Western Civ, it was several centuries before. All of these ideas are planted. Other people build on them. They gain steam, and this is where we are today. Now, that's a bleak picture. Let me just say, throughout all of this history, there are Christians who are taking a stand against it. And you can think what you want about the Catholics, but the Catholics took a hard stand against secularism all the way up until the 1960s. We saw that last week. It's the Protestants who are just imbibing all of this liberal stuff. And the Catholics are actually kind of holding the fort, with certain other things that maybe we don't like about the Catholics, but the fact still remains, Just keep that in mind as these things are going, and think of the practical effect of what would happen if today in America, every Christian parent homeschooled their kid. Just think about how that might affect American society, probably not for the best. Now, I'm not saying, because now my kids are all gone, right? So I'm not saying sacrifice your kid for the better of the gospel in America. You know what I mean? But I do want you to understand what happens when Christians start pulling their children out of these sorts of things. It's, you're taking the salt and the light away. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one as a parent. Yeah. Biz.
One little correction to what you just said.
Please.
Some people will misinterpret that as kids should be salt and light.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
But I don't send my kids to public schools so they can be salt and light. I send my kids to public schools so I can be salt and light to the other parents and the community.
Okay, good. Thank you.
It's not, the onus is not on them.
Perfect. All right, you don't want your 8-year-old there. Yeah, I got you. I won't embellish on that. Very good. Perfect. All right. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time that we have today. Thank you for this country, for the wonderful freedoms that we have that we so often take for granted. One being freedom of religion. We do see changes here in America, a growing animosity to certain Christian principles, but those have always existed in societies. Help us to be the right people that we should be as Christ followers. Help us to make a stand as we should. and help our children as we raise them in godly homes to become the followers of Jesus that you want them to be as well. And we ask for everything here that is done in the worship service, that it would be honoring to you. In Christ Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for your patience.
Maybe you should give a shout out to Truman's book, because if you want
Oh.
one book that really kind of tracks this whole thing,
Carl Truman's book.
and it's called
The Modern Self, that one?
The Rise of the Modern Self. So yeah, it tracks everything that we kind of talked and how it affects the church today. So
Carl Truman's book, Rise of the Modern Self. It was a book I forgot to bring a few weeks ago. Yeah, thank you. Rise and Triumph. That's you're right. Thank you. Of the modern self. If I remember.